Orientalist discourse has been prevalent in discussions of Tibet and the Tibetan people for over a century, serving to create and reshape an idea of Tibetanness that has colored cultural works on/about Tibet, as well as the ways in which Tibetans perceive themselves. Western audiences were first introduced to the magical land of Shangri-La in 1937 through Frank Capra's film Lost Horizon, which subsequently cast a shadow over a more recent Western depictions of Tibet and its people through idealized representations of a secluded Himalayan utopia, where, due to Tibet's perceived non-materialistic and exotic culture, Westerners can attain enlightenment or salvation. To give an example, 7 Years in Tibet, the well-known Franco-American film directed by Jean-Jacques Annaud, was released in 1997 and features an account of Austrian mountaineer Heinrich Herrer's escape from the British Army into Tibet, where he stayed for 7 years. Forming a friendship with the young Dalai Lama, Herrer leaves Tibet a more humble, mature, and enlightened man thanks to the spirituality of the place and its people. The cinematography of the film enhances the image of Tibet as a land of majesty and fantasy, suffused in a golden glow and painted in bright and exotic colors, accompanied by a sweeping orchestral score by Hollywood icon John Williams. It is noteworthy that lighting used throughout the film serves to emphasize lead actor Brad Pitt's golden blonde hair, in doing so, placing him on a pedestal in contrast to the dark-haired Tibetans who surround him. While American audiences were being exposed to Tibet as a vehicle for redemption of a Western protagonist, Chinese audiences were being given a politically charged message designed to propagate an image of harmony between Tibetans and Han Chinese based on rewritten history. Red River Valley is a 1997 film directed by Chinese director Feng Xiaoning that chronicles the 1903-04 invasion of Tibet by the British and the ensuing response of the Tibetan people. Produced as part of a state-sponsored campaign to bolster patriotic spirit in celebration of the return of Hong Kong to Chinese control, the film attempts to convince Tibetans to empathize with their domineering Han Chinese neighbors by including them in the PRC victimization narrative, one that portrays China as a docile victim of foreign conquest attempts and outside interests. As in 7 Years in Tibet, Red River Valley not only puts Tibet and its landscape on display through images of large vistas and exotic colors, but it also focuses its attention, both narratively and visually, on its beautiful protagonists, in this case, portrayed by famous Han Chinese actors rather than actual Tibetans. In contrast, Tibetan filmmakers such as Pema Sadin, as well as Songthaer Gyal, challenge and subvert Orientalist portrayals and idealisms of Tibet in their works, which stand at the forefront of the native Tibetan cinema movement. In his films The Search and Old Dog, Pema Sadin not only constructs narratives around the challenges of life in a rapidly evolving Tibet, but also uses cinematic techniques such as static framing, long shots, and diegetic sound, audio relevant to the telling of the story, to tell stories from the perspective of a Tibetan and in a way that reflects the Tibetan way of thinking. In 2009's The Search, we follow a film crew as they travel across Amdo in search of actors to appear in their film, a story that revolves around a revered Buddhist figure, Drime Kundin. Ultimately, the crew is left disappointed, unable to find an actor suitable to play the role of Kundin. Argued by various scholars to be a commentary on the fluidity and diversity of a Tibetan identity long posited as revolving primarily around religious and spiritual values, the film also serves to exemplify this seemingly constant reshaping and reconstructing of a Tibetan identity, whose premises Sadin tries to deconstruct by emphasizing the complexity and hybridity of Tibetan culture and the Tibetan people. He not only does this through narrative techniques such as the emphasis on a Tibetan people disillusioned with the tales of traditionally revered figures, each person they encounter has a different opinion on Kundin and his merit, but also technically through the inclusion of diegetic music, karaoke and disco songs from the Tibetan diaspora that constantly emanate from the car stereo and, as Vanessa Frangeville argues, create and maintain an ambivalent space. In Old Dog, perhaps Pema Sadin's most successful and most closely examined film, Sadin's directorial evolution is evident, further developing and shaping the identifiable techniques of the nascent native Tibetan cinema movement. The film, released in 2011, follows a young Tibetan man and his father and their interaction with a Han Chinese businessman who offers them a large sum of money for their prized Tibetan Mastiff, a huge dog in high demand as a status symbol in China's urban centers. Though selling it could mean a more secure financial future for their family, the father sees the sale of the family's prized possession as a grim reminder of the erosion of Tibetan tradition and the intensifying generational divide in a rapidly modernizing Tibet. While the story is a clear commentary on the perceived negative impact of Chinese influence on the Amdoan Plateau, commercialism, alcoholism, division, and the theme of fences are prevalent throughout the movie. The cinematic techniques that Sadin uses to reinforce these themes puts his films to new heights, serving as commentaries on and representations of what a truly Tibetan film can look like. In an interview with the Asia Society, Seidon explained that one way he achieves this is by structuring his shots in the style of traditional Tibetan tanka paintings, a style where one image is meant to tell a story, or a multitude, with the various characters and objects forced to the margins in service of a common goal or message, usually a deity and the enlightenment his or her teachings may offer. This modeling on tanka paintings not only allows Seidon to subtly represent Tibet's complexity, but also build, as Kamala Halalikova argues, a carefully built mosaic of contemporary Tibetan society, where the various ideologies, practices, and lifestyles of the Amdoan people are allowed to mix and mingle freely. In telling a complex story with one static image, tanka paintings infer a great deal of movement within their frameless borders, something that Seidon mimics in his use of a multitude of long and static shots that often place characters off-center or on the margins of the frame, allowing the viewer's mind to wander and allowing for interpretation. In contrast to 7 Years in Tibet and Red River Valley, Seidon's films also have a stark lack of close-ups, shots that the aforementioned Tibet-related films, in the grand Hollywood style, use frequently to highlight the protagonist in contrast to the marginal characters around them, who in the case of 7 Years in Tibet, serve to aid and laud the white man in his quest for redemption. Seidon's films, like tanka paintings, are made up of a variety of marginal stories and marginal characters, echoing the sentiment of the paintings which place all living beings on equal footing. To give a concrete example, the subtlety of Seidon's cinematography is evident in this image, with the theme of fences not only emphasizing Chinese encroachment, but also the generational divide between old and young, the father and the dog on one side of the fence, the son and his motorbike on the other. Likewise, in this image, Seidon's tanka style is exemplified by the framing and depth of the shot. The father and son are in dialogue, yet off to the right of the frame, while the wife is framed in bright light through an open door. Due to its ability to reach mass audiences and by operating on many sensory levels, it's clear that film is an extremely powerful tool for delivering a message, giving its creators an immense rhetorical power to shape and reshape discourse and narrative.